Hi everybody, this is Brennan here at Common Motor, common-motor.com on the internet, and today we're going to explain the Honda CB360 cam chain tensioner recall. A lot of talk, a lot of myth around it, and we're going to explain to you what we think or believe all the details are in this recall, so stay tuned. Alright, so there's a lot of internet myth and hoopla about the Honda CB and CL360 cam chain tensioner recall, and we want to straighten that out for you guys right now. Let's talk about a few details that are involved in this extra recall. Number one, the volume of bikes that are actually under, I would call, the recall window is very small. We're talking about the bikes that were produced in the very first part of 1974 and late 73. This was the first batch that came over from Japan from Honda. And the easiest way to identify those is if it's a CB, it has a drum brake on the front. The later batches had disc brakes on the front, and that's a quick way of identifying the bikes. These are what I call the pre-recall bikes. The CLs, you're not going to be able to tell as much, but you're going to have to look at the production date. So the bike is in late 73, early 74 production date. This is how, this is how you can tell if the bike might be a bike that needs to have the recall performed to it. But let's zoom in on the table here, and we're going to look at some of the parts so you can quickly identify if, hey, this is my bike. Is it a pre-recall or post-recall bike? One, and two, how do I make the recall happen? And if you have to do the recall, we here at Common Motor do have all the parts in order to take your bike from pre-recall status into post-recall status by swapping out a few pieces. In regards to the engine serial number, there were supposed to be markings that were done to it to identify, hey, did my engine have a recall performed at the dealership back in the day? Just to be safe, you should always open up the top end of your engine and inspect the cam chain tensioner anyway, because it does have some other wear and durability issues that have to be addressed. But we're actually looking here at the engine serial number. So they're always going to say something like CB or CL360E. E means engine, by the way. A lot of people tell me that's their VIN number on their bike, and I was like, no, that's the engine serial number. After that, you're going to have a dash, a hyphen, and then you're going to actually have what the production number is. Now, the recall was performed on the bike. It's going to have a little dot that stamps just above and just below that dash there. I just kind of made one up with the paint pen here, but it's just going to look a little pin mark. That's all it's going to look a little stamp mark. And that was to indicate, hey, the recall was performed. It kind of looks like a division sign when it's done. Technically, only one of the punch marks signifies the cam chain tensioner recall. The second punch mark was for a recall that was geared around the rocker arm shafts. It's very minor. It's not a big deal. I don't even know why Honda really did it. They redesigned the part, but it's a minor recall as compared to the cam chain tensioner. So let's look at the actual parts of the tensioner so we can identify, is it a pre or post recall tensioner. You don't have to take the engine out of the bike to perform this. It can be done on the bike. Check out our cam chain tensioner replacement video. It's on our YouTube channel here. So cylinder heads here. I don't have the camshaft in it. But what we're looking for is this guy right here, this little cap. And this is going to be towards the back side of the engine here. So the carburetors will be here, intake manifolds, rear of the bike. I am where the front of the bike is. Alright, so here's actually what it looks like off the engine here. This is a post-recall tensioner cap. And I call it, it looks kind of like a wing nut a little bit. It looks kind of like Mickey Mouse ears, you might say. If your top cap looks like this, where it's a straight bar across and doesn't have that kind of Mickey Mouse shape compared to that one there, this is a pre-recall top cap. And this is something that's not talked about in the Honda service manual or the recall at all about the top cap. Everybody's talking about the tensioner, but no one talks about the top cap. And what the top cap, not only does it hold the tensioner in place, but it changes the relative position of where the top of the tensioner is compared to the cam chain. So the post-recall one pushes the top of the tensioner more rearward, whereas this one causes it to come more forward. So if you open your engine up and you find this one, that means you have a pre-recall bike, and this part has to be changed. So this is how we can identify the pre-recall versus post-recall tensioner. The pre-recall tensioner, not only is going to have that top cap, but it may not. It may have been mixed up. You never know. But what I'm looking at is the curl at the end of the tensioner. And if you notice, the curl here curls inward towards the rubbing area. This is where the chain would actually rub on the tensioner, and it curls inward that direction. The post-recall tensioner, the curl goes towards the back, curls backwards. And you see, if we kind of put them side by side like that, they have a different shape to them. In fact, if we kind of put them sideways, you can probably see that a little differently. So you got this, it's got to go. You're going to replace it with the post-recall tensioner, the post-recall top cap, but inside the cap you got this little kind of horseshoe-looking holder here that fits inside the cap. It's this little rubber guy. You should take it out of the old one here and make sure you swap it into the new one, because these are really hard to get your hands on. So what we have laid out here is an approximate idea or showing of how the cam chain and cam chain tensioner system looks in the 360. Now we're going to visualize this as if we were to cut a halfway line through the center of the engine. This would be our sprocket up here where our camshaft is driven, so our camshaft would theoretically be going through that way. And this little plastic guy down there represents the gear on the crankshaft in the bottom. Again, the crankshaft would be through the middle there. On this side is going towards the front of the engine or the front of the bike, and this side is going towards the rear of the engine or the rear of the bike. So the cam chain turns this direction. So this side is always tight because it's being pulled. And this is the side where the cam chain guide, I have kind of a chewed up one here that's broken to show you, but it just kind of butts up against the chain there, and it keeps the chain from doing this number, flopping around and grinding into what would be the crankcase, which would show up kind of right here. So that's the point of the guide there. It's just to keep it from moving. Again, it can break in several pieces, so make sure when you take it out, it comes out as one piece. Like, so you can see this one's broken. Like the top pieces broke off of it. But it's laying flat here just for demonstration purposes. Here is the actual cam chain tensioner. The bottom of the tensioner, so this is the bottom of the engine here, the crankcase, sits in this little cup on this kind of horseshoe shaped part of the tensioner mechanism. So when you go to adjust the cam chain tensioner, what's actually happening is this mechanism moves back and forth because it has a spring pushing on it, this little plunger and spring pushing on it that gets locked in place. So you loosen the bolt up, it loosens this guy up, it puts some pressure on this horseshoe, it pushes on the tensioner this way. The top of the tensioner doesn't move, it's held in place with our top cap. So what the tensioner does is it flexes like that. So the tensioners and guides are wear items. So even though you might be opposed to recall bike, I highly recommend taking the valve cover off your engine and taking the tensioner out and the guide out and inspecting them for wear, especially if the bike's new to you and you don't have that many miles on it. Because the chain's just going to wear grooves inside both the guide and tensioner, and after a while the grooves get too deep and the tensioners wear out and they have to be changed. It is a service item. It isn't for the life of the bike. It is for X amount of miles. How many miles, I don't know if that is yet. We're going to actually dive into an engine here pretty soon and show you after about 10,000 miles of riding what one looks like from new. So until that time, go ahead and open up your engine though and inspect your cam chain tensioner and guide. Alright everybody, this has been Brendan here with Common Motor, Common-Motor on the internet. Thank you for joining us for this video. Make sure you subscribe to our newsletter, follow us on Facebook and Instagram, and also subscribe to our YouTube channel right here. We'll catch you next time.